Chidima's life turned upside down the day she gave birth to her first set of quadruplets. 4 healthy babies cried into the world that night, and the village celebrated her fertility. A blessing, they cheered, gathering to marvel at the tiny feet and hands that filled her home. Her husband, Chaik, beamed with pride. They named the children after the elements: Afu for air, Aya for earth, Miri for water, and Oku for fire. But as the seasons passed and the first year drew to a close, something strange happened. Chidima found herself pregnant again, this time with another set of quadruplets. The village erupted in awe, but fear also lurked in the shadows. How is it possible to bear for children 2 years in a row? They whispered, unsure whether this was truly a blessing or something darker. By the time Chidima had her third set of quadruplets, the excitement of the villagers had turned into concern. The once joyful atmosphere around her home had grown tense. The house, once filled with laughter, was now strained with cries, both of babies and of exhaustion. Chaik, overwhelmed by the responsibility, paced the floor every night. "How will we feed them?" he asked one evening, his voice heavy with worrying as he looked at the 12 children, now running wild through the house. "This can't be normal, Chidima. We can't afford to take care of them all." Chidima knew he was right. The strain was unbearable. Her body ached from the endless pregnancies, and her mind, once sharp, was dulled by exhaustion. But the worst was yet to come. The next year, Chidima's belly swelled once more. The midwives shook their heads as they helped deliver yet another set of quadruplets. "Something's not right," one of them whispered. "No woman can bear this many children year after year. This isn't natural." As the village began to gossip, some spoke of curses. "Maybe she's angered the gods," an elder said, stroking his chin. "No woman is meant to carry so many lives without some kind of punishment." Chidima couldn't ignore the whispers any longer. She sought the help of the village elders, hoping for an answer, for a way to stop this relentless cycle. The elders gathered around her, performing rituals, burning herbs, and offering sacrifices to the gods. But no matter what they tried, the result was always the same. Chidima would conceive again the following year, and another set of quadruplets would be born. The burden became too much to bear. One fateful evening, as the 15th child was laid to sleep, Chidima collapsed, tears streaming down her face. "Why me? Why is this happening to us?" she wept, her hands trembling as she cradled her newborns. The following day, her house became a spectacle. Women from neighboring villages, hearing of her unnatural fertility, began arriving at her doorstep. They brought gifts of yams, livestock, gold, and begged her to share the secret of her fertility. Some women knelt before her, pleading, "I can't have children of my own. Let me take one of yours." At first, Chidima was confused. They wanted her babies. Women who couldn't conceive begged her to let them raise 1 or 2 of her children, believing her womb was blessed by the gods. Desperation had led them to her doorstep, convinced that her fortune could be shared. "What choice do I have?" Chidima thought. She and Chaik were struggling to provide for their growing family. The constant pregnancies had robbed her of her strength, and her home was bursting with children, and so, reluctantly, she agreed. She began giving away her children to families who couldn't have their own, hoping it would ease the pressure on her and Chaik. But it didn't stop. Each year, she continued to conceive, and each year, more babies were born. Soon, Chidima's reputation spread far and wide. Women traveled from distant lands to see the woman who could birth 4 children every year. Some came to beg for her blessing, while others sought answers for their own infertility. The attention became overwhelming. Chidima, who once embraced motherhood with joy, began to feel like a prisoner of her own body. One day, a strange visitor arrived at her door. She was old, her face wrinkled, and eyes sharp with ancient wisdom. Unlike the other women, this visitor brought no gifts. Instead, She stared directly into Chidima's eyes and said, "You are not cursed by the gods, you are cursed by your past." Chidima froze. "What do you mean?" The old woman explained. "Many years ago, before you were born, your mother made a promise to the goddess of fertility, Ayla. She prayed for her lineage to never be barren, and in return, she vowed that her daughters would bear many children for the goddess. But she did not specify how many. The goddess granted her wish, but now you carry the burden of her promise. Your womb will continue to bear children until the goddess is satisfied." Chidima's heart sank. She had never known about this pact her mother had made. Now, she understood why no matter what she did, she couldn't stop giving birth. The goddess had bound her womb to an endless cycle of fertility. "Is there any way to end this?" Chidima asked the old woman, her voice barely a whisper. The old woman studied her carefully before speaking. "There is only one way, but it comes with a price. You must make a new sacrifice to the goddess alive for each set of quadruplets you have born. Only then will the cycle end." Chidima's heart raced. A life for each set of children. The price was too high, unthinkable. She had given birth to 5 sets of quadruplets, 20 children in total. How could she possibly choose which lives to sacrifice? The very thought sent shivers down her spine. "But if I don't do this, I'll keep giving birth forever?" Chidima asked, her eyes filled with fear and desperation. The old woman nodded solemnly. "Yes, the goddess will take your life if you resist, but she demands repayment for the promise made." Chidima's mind whirled with the weight of the decision. How could she choose between her children? How could she offer their lives in exchange for her own freedom? Yet the thought of continuing this endless cycle, of bringing more and more children into a life of hardship and suffering, seemed just as cruel. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "I cannot sacrifice my children," she cried. "There must be another way." The old woman sighed. "There is one other way," she said, her voice grave. "But it will require great courage and sacrifice from you." Chidima looked up, hope flickering in her heart. "What is it?" "You must confront the goddess herself," the old woman said. "Go to her sacred shrine in the forest and plead for her mercy. If you are sincere and willing to make a personal sacrifice, she may choose to free you from the curse." Chidima wiped her tears and stood tall, determined. She had no other choice. That night, without telling anyone, she ventured deep into the forest, guided only by the moonlight. She walked 4 hours until she reached the sacred shrine of Ayla, the goddess of fertility. The shrine was eerie, surrounded by ancient trees and strange symbols carved into stone. The air felt heavy with the presence of something far greater than herself. Chidima knelt before the altar and spoke. "Great goddess Ayla," she began, her voice trembling. "I come before you as a humble servant, a woman bound by a promise I did not make. I have borne your children year after year, but my family suffers. My body is weary, and my heart cannot take more. Please, I beg of you, release me from this burden." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the ground trembled beneath her feet, and a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Ayla, tall and majestic, her eyes glowing like fire. Her voice echoed through the forest. "You dare come before me, asking for release from the promise your mother made," the goddess said, her tone commanding. "Your mother vowed that her bloodline would never be barren, and I have honored that promise. What right do you have to question it?" Chidima trembled, but she stood her ground. "I do not question your power, great goddess. But the burden has become too much to bear. My children are suffering. I am suffering. I ask only for mercy." Ayla stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then her expression softened, though her voice remained stern. "Mercy comes at a cost, Chidima. I will release you from this curse, but you must make a sacrifice of your own." "What sacrifice?" Chidima asked, her heart pounding. Allah's gaze pierced through her. "You must give up your ability to ever bear children again. You will never know the joy of childbirth, but in return, Your family will find peace. Chidima's breath caught in her throat. The thought of never having children again was a heavy price. But it was one she was willing to pay. She had already borne more children than most women ever would in a lifetime. She had no choice but to accept. I agree to your terms, Chidima said, her voice steady. The goddess nodded. Very well. From this day forward, your womb is closed. You will bear no more children. But remember this, your family's prosperity now lies in your hands. Use your wisdom to guide them. With that, Ayla vanished into the night, leaving Chidima standing alone in the forest. She felt a strange sense of relief wash over her, knowing that the endless cycle of childbirth had finally ended. When Chidima returned to the village, she told no one of what had transpired in the forest. But over the years, the village saw the change in her. Though she never bore another child, her home was filled with love, and her children grew strong and prosperous. The curse had been lifted, and peace finally returned to her family. Chidima had paid a great price, but she had saved her children from a fate worse than death. And though she would never again feel the life of a child growing inside her, she found joy in watching her children flourish and the knowledge that she had faced the goddess herself and won. The moral lesson of this story teaches us that the blessings we receive can become burdens if they are not managed wisely. It reminds us that sacrifices are sometimes necessary for peace, and that true strength lies in making difficult decisions for the well-being of those we love.